My next guest has been a journalist for years, but for many, our first introduction to the Washington Post, Jason Rezaian, came in this 2014 episode of Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown.
You happy here?
Look, I'm at a point now after 5 years where I miss certain things about home. I miss my buddies. I miss burritos. I miss having certain beverages with my buddies and burritos in certain types of establishments. But I love it. I love it, and I hate it, but it's home.
By the time that episode aired, Rezaian and his wife had been imprisoned in Iran, where he was held on bogus charges of espionage, kept in solitary confinement for part of his 18 months of captivity. And knowing he was coming on today, it was hard not to think of Jason last night during this moment in the State of the Union address.
My administration has acted decisively to confront the world's leading state sponsor of terror, the radical regime in Iran, to ensure this corrupt dictatorship never acquires nuclear weapons. I withdrew the United States from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal.
That Iran deal Trump was raging against played a major role in both Jason Rezaian's imprisonment and release, as described in his new memoir. It's called Prisoner: My 544 Days in an Iranian Prison, Solitary Confinement, a Sham Trial, High-Stakes Diplomacy, and the Extraordinary Efforts it took to get me out. Jason Rezaian joins me now. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
What was your reaction to Trump last night?
I was watching that. I mean, I've obviously heard him talk a lot about the nuclear deal, the disastrous nuclear deal, the failed nuclear deal. By all accounts, even his own intelligence agency, it was working just fine.
And there was compliance by the Iranians.
Month on month over the last 3 years that it's been in effect, because it's still in effect, because our partners in Europe, China, Russia, and Iran have stayed in the deal. They've been complying the whole way through.
I was right when I said a minute ago that your whole thing played out against the backdrop of this negotiation, right?
Start to finish. I mean, when I was arrested, it was right at the beginning of all indications pointing to the fact that this deal was going to happen. And, I believe through my reporting now about what happened to me, and also reading the tea leaves of the situation, that the forces within the Iranian regime that took me were really trying to throw rocks at this deal before it was ever struck.
So you and your wife, Yegi is how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and your wife, Yegi, are going to some party.
Yeah.
She ends up in jail for a couple of months, you for a year and a half. You were snatched because of alleged espionage, right?
Supposedly,
What was the basis? What was the alleged proof of your espionage?
There wasn't any actual proof. What they did was they went through our emails and our messaging on social media and just picked out little bits and pieces. A Kickstarter project that I started to do.
Go ahead, for what?
I wanted to bring avocados to Iran. For some reason, they don't exist there, and it was a very, fun, tongue-in-cheek project that failed to raise any money. But
they thought avocado was code for something else,
for something
right?
very nefarious. And that I was such an adept spy that they never got me to crack under pressure and tell them what it was code for.
I was right. You were in solitary for a couple of months, right?
For 7 weeks, 49 days.
What was that like?
Horrible. And I use every opportunity I can now to say that as a practice, no matter where it is in the world, solitary confinement needs to be outlawed. It's inhumane. It's the very essence of torture. It's treating people like animals.
How'd you survive it? How big was your cell?
About 8.5 by 4.5 feet.
And how much time did you spend out of it?
They would take me out 20 minutes a day into a yard that was about 20 feet across, have a blindfold on where I was allowed to kind of look down at my feet and just walk back and forth. The only other times that I was taken out of the cell was to be interrogated. So you get to a point where you want to be interrogated.
Among my favorite's a horrible choice of words. Among my favorite parts of your book is your description of the guards. And one piece stuck with me, because I always think about desperation in circumstances like this. They made it clear to you that no one cared about you back home. No one was fighting to get you free, and that your newspaper, the Washington Post, hadn't written a word. And then when you're out of solitary confinement, you're sitting, I think, watching television with a cellmate, if I'm not wrong.
That's right.
What do you see on television?
So, I'm
in this Iranian prison?
So the television that we had access to was an Iranian state television. Every year when world leaders go to New York to attend the United Nations General Assembly, Iranians see this as a big opportunity on the world stage. So what they would do at the end of every newscast was show some of the highlights of the day, and not even translated into Farsi. It was just kind of raw footage. And here's this footage of President Rouhani giving a press conference to the top editors in the world. Including my boss, Marty Barron.
Who used to be the editor of the Boston Globe, but was then editor of the Washington Post.
And you know, he says, Jason Rezaian is a good reporter and a good man, and you got to let him go.
What'd that feel like?
It lifted my shoulders in a way that nothing else had. And, you know, it was the beginning of kind of a crack in the wall of lies that they created. And, you know, I was never hopeless again after that.
Were you hopeless before? I mean, were there times you thought you'd either spend your life there or your life might end in that prison?
I went through lots of ebbs and flows. They told me that they were going to cut my head off. They told me I'd be released tomorrow. They told me I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. Ultimately, after several months, I came to realize that I was a hostage, very similar to the hostages of 1979 and many other hostages that the Iranian regime has taken over the years, and that I had a really good chance of getting out. When and how, I did not know.
Yeah, and I guess some break in the actions were conjugal visits.
Yeah.
And when I first heard about them, before I had read your book, I assumed, well, they're being kind to the prisoner. It had nothing to do with kindness towards you, correct?
No, it had everything to do with kindness towards my wife, but also, you know, kind of upholding their own strange laws. In Islam, if a marriage is not re-upped every you know, every few weeks with a very personal act, it nullifies those vows. So, you know, my wife had become very, very adept at knowing the laws around prison and around prisoners. People have certain rights, and they can't be denied. And she had signed a contract that said she wasn't going to talk to the media. So this was her saying, hey, you know what? If you don't let me do this, I'm going to go out and tell the world you're denying us our rights.
Are you as psychologically healthy now as you appear? I know you were on the radio with us the other day, and I remarked to Margaret Egan afterwards how, I don't know if casual is the right word, you were funny. I mean, like you're being now.
Look,
how are you? I mean, it's a year and a half.
I'm doing pretty well. It's taken me a long time to get to this point where I can sit and have a conversation, look you in the eyes, not worry about what's going on in my peripheries.
Was there a time?
For the first, you know, many months
What
of
was
my
that?
release.
Describe that. What was that like?
I mean, I couldn't get in a car and sit in the driver's seat or in the passenger seat. I get car sick from being, you know, in a confined place for so long. Loud noises scared the hell out of me. You know, I couldn't be in crowded places. I didn't want to talk on the telephone for fear of being surveilled. I mean, this is how it is.
You know, I realized one story about your guards I totally forgot that I loved. There's a singing episode. Can you describe both how that came about and what the end point was?
So in a series of kind of quasi-forced confessions, what they did was they wrote these scripts that I had to read from about all of the people that I knew and you know, my apologizing to Iran for building the sanctions against the country. At the end of this very humiliating experience, they said to me, Jason, you know, we've interrogated some of your friends, and they say that you're a great singer. And I said, well, you missed the point, because I'm not a great singer. I like to sing. I like to go to karaoke parties and do that. I said, no, Jason, if you want to have dinner tonight, you got to sing for your supper, basically. And I just felt like I was being messed with, because I was. So went back and forth for a few minutes. Finally, I said, okay, but you got to stand up. You know, all rise, and they stand there. And
what do you sing?
I go into the Star Spangled Banner, you know, because it's the only thing that came to mind, sort of a slap in their face. And
they have no idea.
They have no idea.
What you're singing.
They don't know. And at the end of it, they said, that was really beautiful. You got very emotional. Your voice cracked. What was it? I said, well, that's the American national song. And you just paid the great Satan the ultimate respect. You guys have committed a big crime.
It was important to Anthony Bourdain, maybe because of you, but I know it's important to you, too, to distinguish between the Iranian people and your captors and the Iranian government. How should we differentiate those different bodies? As
an American of a half Iranian background, it was important to me to differentiate before this happened. Now that this horrible thing happened to my family and me, and we're kind of known for that, it's even more important for me to help separate those two things out. In the next few days, we'll be coming up on 40th anniversary of the Islamic Republic, the founding of this regime. And the vision or the idea that we have of that country is rooted in 1979. It's moved on in many ways. Have the leaders? Not really. But the society has progressed. It's the most educated society in that part of the world. It's young, it's vibrant, and they want nothing more than the opportunity to connect with the rest of the world, including the United States. And we've been denying them that for years. We've made it even worse now.
How do they feel about Donald Trump, though?
Look, it's a mixed bag. Some people say, hey, good for him. He's standing up to the mullahs. But more people say, well, you know what? You can't say that you're standing up for the rights of the Iranian people and then block them from traveling to the United States, which is what the travel ban essentially does. So it feels very disingenuous to a lot of them, and I think that there's some great concern about what the future of the relationship holds between the two countries.
I hope you're as healthy as you say you are. Your book is great.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, Jason.
Thanks for having me on.
Lots of luck with your work in the future.
I appreciate
Jason Rezaian, again, the book again, it's terrific. It's called Prisoner, My 544 Days in an Iranian Prison, Solitary Confinement, a Sham Trial, High-Stakes Diplomacy, and the Extraordinary Efforts It Took to Get Me Out.